All right, week number 2 of at-home learning. Today we're going to solve by factoring. So last week we took quadratics and we solved them by taking square roots. You can only do that when they're set up the right way. So if it's like x squared equals 9 or x squared minus 16 equals 0, all right, something that there's not an x term, all right, even like 5x squared plus 10x equals 0, all right, you can do things like that. But as soon as there's an x term in the middle, you can't solve them with square roots. So we got to have other ways. All right, so this is another way. We're going to solve by factoring today. So in order to do this, you got to be able to factor. We talked about that in class. If you can't factor, you're not going to be able to do some of the things down the line. So this is one of those. All right, so we'll start off with the zero product property. The zero product property says that anytime you have one thing times another thing and they equal 0, like A times B equals 0, that means that either A has to equal 0 or B has to equal 0, or they could both be equal to 0. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to come up with products, and we're going to get products by factoring. All right, so if you look at number 1, solve each quadratic by factoring. We could not solve this with square roots because of that 7x in the middle. All right, we couldn't subtract 12 and do some things like that. So we got to be able to factor. So we have to recognize what kind of polynomial it is. Okay, and then we look at it. This is a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1. So we're going to factor it into a product of two binomials. So we're going to reverse FOIL. So we have two parentheses, x and x, what multiplies together to be 12 and adds together to be -7. That's -3 and -4. So those equal 0. So the zero product property tells us that we have one thing times another thing equals 0. So either one or both of those things have to equal 0. So we're going to assume both of them do. So we're going to say x minus 3 equals 0. We're going to add 3 and get x equals 3. Over here, we're going to say x minus 4 equals 0. All right, add 4, and I get x equals 4. So my answers are +4 and +3. Again, we're going to usually get two answers. Okay. Now, this works exactly like what we did last unit with the x-intercepts and the zeros. So your solutions, your x-intercepts, and your zeros are all the same thing. So once we get the factors down, our answers are going to be the opposites of the factors. So I'm going to take one less step to do the rest of these. All right, number 2. Number 2, you could solve this with square roots. We could add 16, take the square root, and get x is plus or minus 4 and be done with it that way. Or we could solve by factoring, and we could say that's x minus 4 times x plus 4 because that is the difference of two squares. So if x minus 4 is a factor, then I have an answer of 4. If x plus 4 is a factor, then I have an answer of -4. So we can write it out like that, or we could write down x equals plus or minus 4. Number 3, trinomial. We're going to solve it by factoring. Two parentheses, x and x, what multiplies together to be -6 and adds together to be -1. Well, that's going to be a -3x and a +2 equals 0. So this gets me an answer of x equals 3. This gets me an answer of x equals -2. Done. That's all you got to do. If you can factor and the equation is factorable, this is the quickest way to solve quadratics. My calculus kids, this is how we solve quadratics almost daily in that class. All right, but you got to be able to factor, and it has to be factorable. If it's not factorable, you can't solve by factoring. Okay, number 4, we're going to reverse FOIL x and x. What multiplies together to be -18 and adds together to be +3 is +6 and -3. So then my answers are x equals -6 and x equals +3. Two answers. 5, a little bit different. We look at this one, we should recognize, all right, both of them have an x term, so I'm going to factor an x out of both and get x times x plus 5 equals 0. So when we did x-intercepts, when we said x, we just have a term of x, we had an x-intercept of 0. Same thing, we have a solution of 0. X equals 0, one answer. X equals -5 is my other answer. Number 6, we could add 4, take the square root and get plus or minus 2, solve with square roots, or we could factor this to be the difference of two squares, x plus 2, x minus 2 equals 0. So I get an answer of x equals -2 and x equals +2. And that's how you do number 6. All right, 7, common terms. So we're going to factor out an x. That's going to leave us with an x minus 3. Zero product property says that either one or both of those factors has to equal 0 for this to be true. We're going to assume both. So we're going to get x equals 0. And this one's going to get us x equals 3. Number 8, looks like I forgot to put equals 0. So we'll put equals 0 there at the end. All right, so I'm going to factor that, reverse FOIL. X and X, the two numbers that multiply together to be 15 and add together to be -8 would be -5 and -3. All right, so I'm going to get answers of X equals 5 and X equals 3. All right, two answers there. Number 9, same thing. Reverse FOIL. X and X, the two numbers that multiply together to be 20 and add together to be 9, are +4 and +5. We get X equals -4 and X equals -5. Okay. Now, 10 and 11. We can only solve by factoring if the equation equals 0. So on 10 and 11, we got to do a little bit extra work. So on number 10, we're going to add 8 to both sides. And that's going to give me x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. So now we can use the zero product property because it's set equal to 0. So we factor this to be x minus 4 and x minus 2. And then my answers are x equals 4 and x equals 2. Again, if you want to check those, you can plug each one of them in and you get a true equation. Number 11, a little bit more work. We're going to subtract 4x from both sides and subtract 10 because we need a 0 on the right. So if we subtract 4x and subtract 10 there as well to keep the equation balanced, x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Factors to be x minus 3 and x plus 2. So my solutions are x equals 3 and x equals -2. In my opinion, this is the best way to solve quadratics, okay, if it's factorable. All right, so if it's factorable, you're going to do this. Now, I have one sheet of notes, two different worksheets. Some of you have been emailing me your worksheets or sharing them with me. That is fine, but you don't have to do that. The only thing I'm going to grade is your project at the end, which is a slideshow. On your slideshow, you should be showing an example and then the work that you would use to get the answer, okay? And a slide for each of the problems. Again, the slideshow directions are at the bottom of the video. So hope you're doing well. If not, like I said, email me, text me, get a hold of me. But so far, the people who have contacted me are doing great. There's 2 worksheets to go with this, and there will be a video after each one of me going after them or going over them so you can see how well you did. So again, stay safe. Wash your hands, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll see you back before the end of the school year, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you.